Bennets and Bingleys A Pride and Prejudice Variation. By Amrita Bin. Volume 2 of Doctors and Destiny. Copyright Amrita Bin. No unauthorized reproductions allowed. All rights reserved to the author. No inspirations for characters drawn from real-life individuals, no resemblance to real individuals intended. Bennets and Bingleys. First edition January 25, 2023. Copyright 2023 Amrita Bin. Written by Amrita Bin. Bennets and Bingleys. A Pride and Prejudice Variation. By Amrita Bin. Volume 2 of Doctors and Destiny. Chapter 1. When is life anything other than a mad whirl for a new probationer? Generally speaking, it's as much as she can do to hang on to the essentials of her course of study and training on the ward, let alone anything less fundamental to her new life. So Elizabeth was finding things to be, in any case. It was a good thing, overall. She did not worry for long about Mr. Darcy's comments, nor her end-of-year exams, nor getting caught on Jane's ward, nor indeed any other single particular thing. There was simply no time to worry. It was a miracle, indeed, that Elizabeth found herself able to remember the least item of information beyond the correct bandaging of a green stick fracture, or no-touch technique in contagious cases, up to and including the fact that she had arranged to meet her sisters, Mary, Lydia, and Kitty, in town upon the following weekend. Their mother might not have entrusted the two younger girls into the care of 17-year-old Mary, who was, as Elizabeth had put it to their father before now, a little too brilliant to have the least sense whatsoever. But in fact all of them were in London spending a few days with their aunt and Uncle Gardner, and their aunt had volunteered to run them down to see Elizabeth on her day off. And also to see Jane, who arrived at that moment, just when Elizabeth had begun to wonder where in heaven the girl had got to, and if she had told her the wrong place to meet. But no, here she was in a blue linen dress and cardigan coat, walking through the door of the Lambton tea rooms in late September sunshine, lacking only an actual seraphic halo, or perhaps a harp beneath her arm, to complete the effect. Elizabeth and Mary called out to her as she looked around, and Kitty remained oblivious, steeped in a teen scene magazine filled with pop idols and silver screen hunks. But Lydia could not be contained, and ran to greet her with open arms, and to hug the life out of her. And Elizabeth followed to hug her too, less starved for her company, living and working in the same institution, but still a week was a long time to go without spending a single minute with the divine Jane. "Darling, I was wondering where you'd got to," she said affectionately. "Did you get lost?" It was a somewhat reasonable question, for they'd not tried this place before, tucked down a little side street in the small country town abutting the great Pemberley estate. But Jane the Incomparable was the last person to get lost in the normal course of things. It was part of what made her the ideal nursing candidate, kind, compassionate, empathetic, but also organized, calm, cool and collected, an unflappable source of advice, care and wisdom. At least, so Elizabeth would usually have sworn it to be. Now, though, Jane came forth with no very coherent answer, and failed even to meet Elizabeth's eye as she murmured, no, not at all, Lizzy, I was only, window shopping, you know, and then the time just ran away from me. I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting, my loves." But Elizabeth, if put on the stand, would have sworn to it that Jane was barely aware of what she was saying, and certainly had been scarcely even listening to Elizabeth's question. Her lovely blue eyes were distant, wandering about the tea rooms, even as Kitty kissed her cheek, and Mary took her coat and settled her down into a seat at the table. Admittedly, she did perk up a mite as a waitress passed by, and ordered a pot of tea and a plate of scones. Unwinding the scarf from around her neck, she seemed to come, mostly, back down to earth, finally fully aware and taking notice of her family members present. "Oh, it's so nice to see you again, my loves," she said affectionately, looking around at the excess quantity of sisters she had on hand, a spare available for any requirement. "It's been far too long. Lydia, my love, how are your singing lessons going along? And are you signing up for youth theatre this year, Kitty? And Mary, darling?" "Oh, Don't go asking her about anything," Lydia advised with a cheerful larkiness. "She'll only go and tell you about it, after all. And I'm sure we've heard enough by now about how silly and frivoling we all are, and it's a dreadful thing how we've dragged her away from her studies because now she's absolutely dead certain to crash out of her leaving certificate, poor love. I'm pretty sure you could do with being a little more concerned about your own studies and eventual leaving certificate, if they ever let you leave, instead of just keeping you around as a mascot and general dog's body, Elizabeth noted, somewhat tart. You needn't get on Mary's nerves about it. Although, she added, because they'd been sipping tea and listening to Mary's fretting for near on half an hour now before Jane's arrival, and honestly it was getting a bit much, Lydia does have a point, Mary love. Because, quite seriously, if anyone can afford to take a few days off from revision, and still be a dead cert for top marks and every award going, then darling, who else but you? The books will still be there when you get home again, love. Heaven knows it was the truth, and she put an arm about a rather sour-faced Mary and kissed her cheek, in spite of all her wriggling and disapproving pout. After a moment's scuffle she thrashed her way out of Elizabeth's affectionate wrestling hold, with her spectacles only slightly askew, and primly settled them back in place upon her pretty tilted nose, straightening the long braids that were tightly pinned to her shapely skull, although they were no more disarrayed than they ever were. The expression on her face, however, was still utterly unconvinced. "See, I'm quite confident of it," Elizabeth said firmly. "Now. You're bound to win every scholarship you put in for, and we all know it, Lord knows, one of us has to." Well, that was an unguarded slip of the tongue, a bit of a howler, and she moved on swiftly, as even Lydia was momentarily silenced and unsure what to say, surely a first for any occasion. Ignoring her sister's suddenly stricken faces, she turned and said instead pleasantly to Jane, "Jane love, it's almost a week since I last saw you. And a week is much too long." And she winked, on saying it, because that for sure would distract her elder sister's mind. A telling off was a damn sight better than that sad and concerned expression upon dear Jane's face. True to her intuition, it worked like a charm, and the slight frown marring the perfection of Jane's smooth marble brow was cleared away. Instead she pouted severely, and said, "Yes, I know it very well. And you shouldn't have seen me at all on that occasion, either. Girls, would you like to hear what your sister has been getting up to?" This merited pleased and assenting whoops and catcalls from Lydia, which had to be rapidly hushed up, and Jane's scarf wrapped around her head in a muffling threat that was only half a joke. They didn't want to be known as the girls thrown out of the Lambton tea rooms, after all. Kitty followed her bad example with a few timid ululations of much lower volume, but a shake of the head from Jane was enough to dampen her little rebellion. What was a surprise, though, was to have Mary, bang her fist on the table, and vigorously announce, "Yes. Indeed I would. Tell us more, Jane, for I find myself strangely intrigued." Oh, if only one of those tight braids had been a little less securely cemented to her head with a riotous excess of Kirby grips. "If I could get a decent grip on one of your pigtails, then I'd pull it," Elizabeth informed her most scholarly baby sister pleasantly, to be met with an uncharacteristically cheerful and impish grin. "I know," Mary said. "That's why I'm not getting up too close." She took a mouthful of scone as she spoke, and elaborately swayed away out of Elizabeth's reach, as the elder girl made a half-joking grab at her locks. It was nice, in fact, to hear her laugh, and be every bit as cheeky as came naturally to her younger siblings. "Aha, see what you get for keeping me away from the books, by might or right," she pointed out with a grin. "Is it really such a good idea?" If the end result was Mary succumbing to Lydia's bad influence, and a total disrespect for Elizabeth's authority as the bossiest Bennet sister ensuing, then possibly she had a point. But Elizabeth didn't have time to pursue that line of thought, for Jane ploughed on, saying now, "Well, I'm not entirely sure that Lizzy has any business telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing, or where we should or shouldn't be, Lizzy?" There was a chorus of oohs and giggles in response, and Kitty cried quite sweetly, "What have you been up to now, Lizzy?" Oh, damn it all. The truth would out, she supposed, and better that she tell the tale